Hi, this is Annie Meehan with H3 TV, where we encourage people as they walk through their disruptions. It's been almost 10 months since Hurricane Ian hit our home, but prior to Hurricane Ian, there was COVID, and after that was the Great Resignation, and there's always something. And so we know that disruption happens, and I decided, what if I could come into your office, into your homes, and spread some encouragement? What if I could invite guests every week to share with you their tips? How do they stay hopeful, healthy, and happy as they navigate disruption, change, and challenges and storms that hit our life? So lean in today and listen as I welcome my guest, Tahira, to the stage. Hey, Tahira, thanks for being with me.
Hi, Annie. How are you?
I'm great. So tell me about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Where do you live?
Who am I? Hello, my name is Tahira. I am a mother and an event producer, and I live in Vancouver, Canada, but I just am home for 1 week after 8 weeks in Europe and heading to Iceland this week.
Wow.
So there's, I'm trying to just not, I'm trying to navigate my time zone that is not my time zone for a week, basically, this week. And for work, I am the head of program for IMEX. So work with an amazing team there to curate content for the event industry.
Oh, fantastic. I love that you're an event producer, not just a meeting planner. She's an event producer. She produces and makes it amazing. So tell me about your kids. Little kids, big kids, middle.
Oh my goodness, my adults. So I have a 24-year-old who is a visual effects artist who will be coming with me to Iceland.
Oh,
And I
cool.
have a 23-year-old who is dabbling in event planning while she's also doing a master's in public health. With a focus on Indigenous needs. And she just spent 2 weeks with me in London, Brighton, and Slovenia. So I have little travelers, basically.
I love that. I was at the National NSA conference for speakers, and one of the women was saying the best days in our life is when our kids come alongside and work with us. And I was like, absolutely. I love it. My daughter does a little bit of work with me, and I really enjoy that. Yeah. So when you think about storms and disruption, what comes to mind for you? What do you think of when I say that?
I think that they just happen all the time is what I think. So there's always going to be something that happens. And of course, it's usually going to happen when we don't expect it. And it's just part of life. And I think it's, we talk about resilience, being a key tool. And it really is something that I think if I can teach my children two things. One was that everybody has their own story. If they tell you, it's not yours to tell. And the other is that honestly, things are going to happen. So let's just, when they were little, they didn't really fight a lot. They still don't. But I just said, basically, at the end of the day, the world is a tough place. And we're going to be people who have your back. So don't fight with each other. Don't fight about toys. We have enough. And don't fight about food. We live in Canada. You have a lot. So, it's that, there's always going to be something that happens. How are you going to deal with it? It's going to be a tool that we have to learn.
I love that. I love that you taught them really have each other's backs. We talk about that a lot. My daughter and I were talking the other day, and she was saying, I love our family unit. And my son said, I think I have the best parents in the world. And I had to call him back and say, somebody has better parents than you. And he's like, who? I'm like, our dog. Our dog doesn't have to do any chores. He's like, oh my gosh, that's true. And also I wanted to say to our listeners, if you have a question or comment, feel free to put in the chat box. We will respond to them. If not during the show, after the show as well. So what is something personally or professionally you've gone through that has been a disruption in your life or a big challenge or change?
So I'm going to go way back to the way back. So when I was 6 years old, I wanted to be a hairstylist. I got a little doll. And then when I was 13, I started working in hair salons. By the time I was 17, I was a fully licensed hairstylist. I took beauty culture in high school, like Frenchie in Greece. And I loved it. By the time I was 21, I was doing show work, managing a salon. And by the time that I was 26, I was lying on a table having surgery because my arms were never going to work the way they were supposed to. And everything was different. And so I cried. It was very tragic. It was a long time of, not being able to do the job the way that I wanted to do it, doing a lot of physical therapy, trying to figure out what the problem was. And it was really by accident that we discovered what the problem was, which was while I was doing physical therapy at the hospital, one of my clients went by and he's like, check her for TOS, which was thoracic outlet syndrome, which it's pretty uncommon. And what was more uncommon was that I also had an extra rib. And your first rib is under your collarbone. And when they did the surgery, what they found was that the extra ribs had grown together, and so I had permanent damage to my ulnar nerves, which control this half of your hand. And so when I went between, after they had done the second surgery, the surgeon, who was also one of my hairstyling clients, said, "You'll never do hair again." And so I cried a lot. And then my lovely boyfriend at the time was like, "It's okay, we'll get through this. It's, I love you." And I was like, "It doesn't matter," which is, of course, what every loving boyfriend wants to hear. And so it was, it was two major surgeries, like two sort of 3-hour surgeries, 3 months apart, a year of recovery, deciding what I was going to do next. I just celebrated my 30th anniversary with that boyfriend, and we went on a lovely cruise in the Mediterranean. So it seems to have all worked out. But, he doesn't, he does remind me that there was a time when I didn't appreciate him enough.
Yes.
So, I think that that's a big part of it is, at the time, how do you build your support system? So at the time, I couldn't lift my arms up long enough to wash my own hair in the shower. I couldn't drive. I couldn't go to the grocery store and carry a thing home. And so the people who were with me during that time, who are, still friends, they'll still now go to help me. And I'll be like, no, it's okay. Like, I'm okay. But it is a long time to get through the initial recovery and then to rebuild muscles, and to figure out what you're going to do next with your life. And it turned out that I chose events because I thought they would be so glamorous and exciting and fun. And, and they are all of those things, but they're also a ton of work.
Yes.
And they're not the career for everybody. Events are hard. There's a reason it's the 5th most stressful job usually.
Yeah.
And so it's been good, I think, to have gone through that. So that was probably, in terms of sort of scope, scale, time, effect on life, was all big. And then everything after that is you can kind of deal with it, right?
Well, and it teaches you, right? Like you realize you feel like it's the end of your world, but it's not, right? Like it was something you had dreamed a long time and you had fulfilled. And now what? You're making me think about two things. One, I saw the Barbie movie last night. Have you seen it?
So want to know, I literally have I just have been home for a minute.
Well, what's funny about it is they talk about hair and how girls practice haircuts on Barbie. And brothers do it to be mean to their sisters, cut the hair of the Barbie so they have a heart attack. But anyway, you made me think of that. I just saw it last night. It was cute. And you have great hair still. So I just wanted to say that to you. My daughter went to school to be a event planner, hospitality, tourism, and event planning. And then afterwards was like, holy cow, this is a lot of work and evenings and weekends. And especially when you're starting out, or always, right? And so
always, it doesn't change. The hours don't change no matter how senior you get.
That's right. So you're gone for a long time, but you also have great adventures and see amazing things. And with every job, right? The pros and cons. And how many years have you been in the event industry then?
30.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. So I did a diploma in 1993, and then I went back to school in 2010 and did a degree. And I just finished a master's actually in creativity and change leadership in May. So, which has been really fun because it really just layered on, understanding really the impact that we can have with events, I think is, so my final paper was around the intersection between creativity, leadership, and intentional event design, and how we can use that to drive outcomes.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. Well, I decided to get a master's in literally a day. So that was, it's not the way to get a master's. But now I'm glad that I did it. And it was such a good opportunity, and such an amazing cohort that we had. And so, yeah, there was days where I was just like, I basically have lost my mind, but
Well, let's go back to your disruption as a young woman in your career. How did you stay hopeful? You kind of mentioned you had a great partner that really believed in you, but how did you stay hopeful on those dark days and in the days, especially not only the diagnosis and the treatment, but the year-long restoration that can be, as you and I talked about before we started, that journey back, right?
Lots of drugs. It was really a journey. It was, there's a lot of pain that went along with it, like actual physical pain that went along with it. So there was, just, knowing not for at first you don't know. Like first you just know you can't do what you love
Yeah.
and have to really decide how to manage that. And it's also I was supporting myself, so it's also how are you going to live?
Yeah.
And I had been really, I guess, fortunate in we had a really good insurance agent for the salon that I worked with who encouraged us to get disability insurance. So imagine being 23 years old and buying disability insurance.
Wow. Yeah.
So fortunately, I had done that, and I had done that because our insurance agent had he passed away when he was 40, but he passed away when he knew his whole life that he wouldn't have a long life.
Mm.
And when he originally talked to us about the insurance, I didn't know that I found that out later when he wasn't able to work anymore. He
Mm.
had a genetic condition where he had basically half of both of his lungs removed. And so he was on permanent oxygen by the time he was about 38 and then lived till about 40. But he didn't stop living. He was married. They had, a really great life, but they chose to have a really great life. And I think that that's the thing is we all have to make decisions every day
Yeah.
about how we're going to live and how it's very easy. There's lots of, mental health is real. Addiction is real.
Yeah.
There's lots of things that are going to happen that will be very difficult to manage. And every day you just have to decide, get up and, decide how am I going to live today?
Mhm.
And, this is something, it's interesting, there's things that as we go through life, we don't always realize, so I would make, when our kids were smaller, we would do gratitude. So we'd be driving like to soccer games or whatever. And I'd have the kids in the car all, share their gratitudes. And my kids would kind of roll their eyes and they would still do it. And, but, fast forward, 10 years, Julia, when she moved out at 18, she said, once I leave, I'm never coming back. And I was like, you're always welcome here. So when, so she lived away at university for 2 years. And when COVID happened, it didn't make sense to stay living away and do digital school and pay all those costs. And so, she's like, can I move back home? And I was like, of course. And she's like, you're enjoying this, aren't you? I'm like,
Little.
yep, I really am actually. So she was home for that year. And when she left and I went in, I didn't, of course, as parents, we never go in their rooms when they're at home.
Yeah.
And because they're horrifying, it doesn't matter what age they're at. And when she left and I went in to, sort of flip the room over to, make it a spare room and things because she's moving back. And on the back of her door was a list of goals and a list of gratitudes, so I think that, yeah, and I mean, it was very lovely to see that some of the lessons that we instill when they're younger
Yeah.
are the lessons that will stay with them and make them the humans that they're going to become in the world.
Yeah.
And, I can assure you that my mother did not have me writing goals and gratitudes when I was a child.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I love you listened and you learned, like
Yeah.
you're living out what you learned. So what I heard from you is number one, you were a really good listener to your insurance agent because most people would laugh in the face at 23 years old of an insurance agent saying buy disability. You're out of your mind. You're trying to rip me off, but he really wasn't. He knew his own story, and we can't imagine when we're young, I'm going to live forever. We have a lot of relatives in their 90s. So you just think life's going to keep going, but that's not always true, right? And things can disrupt us. And so you listened. You surrounded yourself with good people, you had a good community, and you had a heart of gratitude. And what you experienced in your own young life of like, oh my gosh, as much as painful as this is, at least I have insurance, at least I have this, you passed on to the next generation. And I think that's always such a thing I like to teach. I think gratitude's so good, but now what do we do with that to give to the next generation or give to another person that doesn't have it based on family or friends or whatever. So I love that you had some tools to stay hopeful. How did you stay healthy? Especially, I imagine you were not quite as active. So how did you maintain health? And when I mean health, it's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's financial, it's relational. How did you get to a place of being healthy?
I was definitely not healthy during that time.
Okay.
It was very hard to do anything. So, I mean, I could walk, basically. I could walk. and I
Okay.
couldn't do anything else. I literally couldn't lift up a can of soup.
Mm.
And then when you have the surgery, you can't actually use your arm at all. So you have to start walking up walls and, get it back again. I would say let's fast forward to now when I don't take my health for granted.
Yes.
So I just traveled for 8 weeks,
Yeah.
went to 4 conferences, including the IMEX in Frankfurt,
Wow.
9 countries, went on this lovely cruise. And so I have a rule when I travel that I don't eat beige food, or 80% of the time, let's just say I don't eat beige food,
Okay.
which just means anything that if you stand in front of a coffee shop, anything that's in that case is going to be calorie high and nutrition low. So
Okay.
I just try to really stick to things with color.
Okay.
I try
I
to
like
walk.
that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
Don't eat beige food. Let's repeat that because people are listening. I know you need this. And I know a lot of our listeners travel a lot. So no beige food, eat color.
yeah,
I like wear color, eat
yeah,
color. Perfect. Okay. Keep
yeah.
going.
And I would say, don't never eat it.
Yeah.
There's, but
80%.
but 80% of the time, I just try to, just really stick to healthy choices.
Okay.
And I try to exercise every day and do something. Sometimes that's a lot of walking. Sometimes it's going to the hotel gym. Sometimes it's, doing some kind of really super fun activity that you might not get a chance to do if you were just at home.
Yeah.
So I think, and then it is just, there's days when, just think about that, all that, it's hard, there's days when it's hard. And just reminding yourself or myself how lucky I am that this is what we get to do.
Yeah.
So, it's, yeah, I think it's, you have to, again, with your health, you have to make choices. You have to choose to make the time to be healthy.
Yeah. I like shifting that one word, I think is healthy. This is what I get to do, not this is what I have to do. I'm going to shift from get to or from have to I get to. I like avoiding beige food most of the time. I think it's easier than people having this long list. It's like eat something that's colorful. Now that could be Skittles, but ideally not always Skittles, but something colorful, right? And also getting that movement in. And I know when your time schedule is different, when we're traveling to different time zones and different countries, it can be really hard. You said sometimes I think it's hard more often than not because you're out of your routine. Do you have a particular, no matter what time zone you are, no matter where you are, time you wake up or way that you start your day? Do you have something like that?
So because I live in Vancouver, Canada, and work with the UK, and before that working with CITP, also working with people across many time zones, I usually get up around 5 or 5:30.
Okay.
And so what I don't do anymore, which is this is the best tip ever. People only listen to this one thing.
Okay.
This one thing.
Here's it one thing.
Anybody who gets up and starts their day with caffeine, tea, coffee, any caffeine, Diet Coke. What happens when so I learned this from my daughter who's doing her health degree. So when you wake up in the morning, you have something in your system that's called adenosine. So it's a neurochemical that helps us sleep. It's very important. It's a natural thing. And when you wake up, it takes about 60 minutes-ish for the adenosine to dissipate from your body. So that time when you're waking up, you're feeling a little drowsy, the first thing we would do is reach for that coffee. If you instead reach for some water, some herbal tea, something with some people do hot water with lemon, apple, doesn't matter what you have, just don't have caffeine in that first hour. Because what happens is if you have caffeine, it blocks your adenosine. That sounds great. That gets you through that first hour. Fabulous. But adenosine is stronger than caffeine, so it will pull apart. And usually around 2:00 in the afternoon, you'll get that slump. If you don't, this is game changing. I only started doing this in February. This is
Okay.
game changing for your life.
Yeah.
So if you do not have coffee for that first hour that you are awake, you will so much have every afternoon be better and less slumpy.
All right. I'm going to give it a try. I'll
Try it.
report back and tell you.
Try it for a week and then let me know how it
Go
goes.
a little while before I have a caffeine. Like sometimes I'll go a few hours or an hour. A lot of times it's within the first hour, but my husband's pretty much within 10 minutes of getting up. He reaches for that energy drink to have that caffeine buzz to get him awake, but maybe he should slowly wake up and then not. Well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll give it a try.
It changes your afternoons. So that's, and changing your afternoons for the better, that's game changing.
Especially when you're on the road or you have an afternoon event or you've got an all day event and you don't want to crash.
You have to just sit in your office for 8 hours. Like every day at 2:00, you're like,
Yeah. Can I have a Snickers or a nap Or another cup of
And
coffee.
that's what we do is then we start looking for more sugar or for caffeine.
Yeah.
When if we actually just let our body do what it's supposed to do, then you avoid that.
And fascinating. I love it. All right, that was a great tip. So lots of good tips on how to stay healthy no matter what. And also I love your transparency that, you really, first of all, we're in a lot of physical pain, but also emotional pain and also unable to move because we know there's people that physically can't move their bodies right now because of their diagnosis or what they're going through in life. How about happiness? How did you stay happy? How do you stay happy now when life is stressful? You are juggling a lot of details, a lot of different events, and your time schedule. So how do you find humor and
This
happiness?
is my new favorite topic. So we were talking before we started this about, speaking and how you are a lovely, bubbly, super high energy speaker, whereas
Yeah.
I am not a high energy speaker, but I am a speaker.
Yeah.
And I was just speaking in Slovenia, and it was about happiness, actually.
Mm.
So and I'm working on, so I wrote this book a couple of years ago.
You can hold it up to the camera.
2017. Oh my God. So 2017, I wrote Intentional Event Design.
Okay, nice.
2017, think about this. So, and then at the end of 2022, I was like, oh, this is going to be crap. I'm just going to have to redo everything. And it turned out, no, this is a really good book. It is the how-to of how to create purposeful events.
Awesome.
I went back in, so the version that's available now is I went back in and updated it for 2022, things around psychological safety and happiness and things that people had to do. And it's, it already talks about digital and hybrid events. It already talks about virtual events and how to make things better. It talks about wellness. So all of the things that we're struggling with in the event industry right now, it's all there. And it's, so now I'm, that's great. So I've been doing that for a long time. And it's something I absolutely 100% believe we need to have more sustainable, healthy events where people have, net positive outcomes from the work that they're doing.
Yeah.
And the things that we're creating for other people. And so what I'm really looking at now is how do we use live events to cultivate happiness? And, if we look at events as being sort of high points, then, it's, how do we create more high points that are going to make people think about what they're doing? And so what I looked at was, why is it important? And why is it important if we're an event planner and we're saying we want a seat at the table? And then we need to use all of our big girl words and our big boy words, and we need to have data and we need to measure things. And well, how do you measure happiness? Well, guess what? There's a World Happiness Index where 145 of the world's 195 countries are measured on happiness. So if the world's measured on happiness, and then we know that there's a lot of organizational wellness, and there are in fact 10,000 journals, articles, periodicals, research papers every year on how to be happy, how to create organizational wellness. So this is something a lot of people are taking really seriously. I have a stack of, books, another stack of books over here. I have 6 books over here that all have belonging in the title. Why is belonging in the title? Because social belonging is our number one thing that makes us intrinsically happy. How do we design for belonging? How do we create safe spaces for people? How do we use our live events to cultivate happiness? So there's a ton of work that's been done on it and a ton more that we can do. So this is like book number 2 is stories of how do we find happiness. So when I look at how do we find happiness, first we need to understand that happiness it's not a right, it's a privilege to be happy, that we can't know happiness if we haven't known sorrow. I mean, you've just been through the biggest thing you could possibly ever have imagined going through. And you now have to figure out when you don't have your home that you want to live in the place that you plan to live. But you still get to have the person you wanted to do it with. And the people you wanted to do it with. And you have a meal and a place to live and lots of things other people don't have the privilege of having. So how do we take those small moments and focus on what's this small moment, and so I just look at things, it's like a child laughing, a flower growing, there's so many moments that we can take in a day if we just focus on those moments. And, and I definitely get cranky and lose patience and feel frustrated, and I'm just a normal human being. So you have to remind yourself. And if I don't remind myself, I can assure you that my husband or my children will remind me how lucky I am. Um, that we're able to live this life that we get to live,
Yes.
largely by being born where we're born. So when we look at the World Happiness Index, one of the key things is are you somewhere that is absent of corruption?
Right.
And that brings a lot of countries' scores down.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it's like, do you have access to health and good longevity?
Yeah.
That's a factor.
Healthcare, education, all the
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Ways and social belonging. And so there's very, very clear criteria that they measure it on. The average is 5.53 out of 10. So on the world happiness is about half. So we're about halfway there for most of the world on a way that governments have created a platform where we can have access to a lifestyle that we could be happy.
Yeah. I think belonging is really a buzzword right now, and it certainly is. But I will say that since I started coaching people, speaking for 20 years, coaching for a little over 10, the number one challenge, and I didn't matter if it was a CEO that was married with 3 kids or a single person that was entry level, was loneliness and not feeling connected. And then obviously the pandemic amplified that. And so people are fully aware of like, I feel really disconnected and I thought I wanted to work from home, but I work from home. I live alone. I don't have the community that, I mean, I worked in the corporate world for 9 years. You took for granted that you and I were going to meet up at the at the water cooler and say, what did you watch last night? Some offices had wine coolers. What did you watch last night? Or what did you do? Or just that continue the conversation, not it's 11 o'clock, meeting's over, turn off Zoom. There was that ongoing, or hey, that morning meeting was great. I thought of another idea. That conversation doesn't linger or then disconnects us. Therefore, the isolation and lack of belonging. I know that belonging is the word, but for me, that's what for years I've been working with people. I'm like, where are you connected? Not really to anyone. I'm too busy to have friends. I'm too busy climbing the corporate ladder. I'm too busy. And I'm like, we are created for connection. And you're right, joy comes from it. And joy comes from it sometimes because we're laughing together, sometimes because I'm laughing at you, and sometimes because you're laughing at me. And I need some of that in my life. I need that humanity that, as you said, brings us back to reminding us we're human. We are human, and we have much, but we also do have real feelings and good days and bad days. And so, yeah.
Well, the numbers are staggering. I mean, was a pretty recent study that was with college students living in dorms, 66% feel lonely. So we are not doing a good job of teaching people how to be connectors either. And that part of connecting to people is sometimes somebody's not going to like your idea. Sometimes you're going to be rejected. Sometimes, you're not going to agree. And that's okay. Like we need to set up, different rules and ways for people to be able to respectfully disagree and to learn how to apologize. And we can't go through life thinking that everything is just going to be perfect all the time. It's not. It's going to be life. And, it's there's going to be misunderstandings.
I got a visual when you first started talking about this, and whatever, I get a lot of pictures in my head, but I imagined at a conference this huge room, but in the room there was like 10 different areas that you could go sit, right? Like one was like beanbag chairs in bright colors, and one was structured desks, and one was all these different things. Because I was thinking about, yes, we do need connection, but then like you go network, and then there's an introverted person that freaks out because they're like, I just want to go to my room because I'm like, I don't have a structure and I don't want to talk to anyone randomly. And then you have an extroverted person that's just so, and I was like, I wonder if you set up all these physical areas, what would people be drawn to? And kind of like a disc assessment, but more like office style. Like, is it open? Is it closed? Is it windows? Is it view? Is it no? I don't know. I don't know if that's.
Well, I think that's, what's going to be fun is that's what people are going to see this year at IMEX, is that, and this is what we've been starting to design for. So we've been doing a lot of work with the Google XI team and, so there's always been a quiet space and a be well kind of space for a long time, like more than a decade. So it's like, well, if we're not going to have that same kind of dedicated space, which we're not, what we need to think about is how do we have, like, we know it's an overwhelming environment. You come in, You might or might not know people. It's a very large, busy, bright show floor. And some people feed off of that. And some people can feed off of that and then need a little break.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just need a little break. So,
Mhm.
so people will be able to go and do kind of a VR quiet experience. They'll be able to go, and there's different exhibitors that have, whether it is massage, because you just need a little bit of touch. I think that's one of the things, like, traveling for 8 weeks. I had my husband with me for 2 weeks and my daughter with me for 2 weeks, and I had 4 weeks of
By yourself.
nobody that you would necessarily want to have touching you. So, but human touch is it's an important thing, right? So it's, maybe you just need to go and get a little 10-minute massage, and that's going to be what resets you. Or you're going to go and do a little VR escape, or you're going to go and sit in a quiet room where there's like some liminal space where you can just literally sit and just listen to some quiet music
I
without
love
talking to anybody.
Yeah.
So we're going to have all of these different environments that people can test and try things, because it's not, it's introvert, it's extrovert. It's, there's so much more work being done now on understanding, how do we include neurodivergent personalities?
Yeah.
And that there's lots of them, and that this is also part of life. So we are different. While we look differently externally, we are also different internally.
That's right.
And so understanding how we can help people find their spaces where they can have time to reflect, contextualize, just space out for a few minutes and reset themselves,
Yeah.
to be able to find healthy food, to be able to find enough water and hydration, and be able to,
Get what
just
you need.
find ways that work for you to connect with people that are not, and then we'll do a lot of the sessions are going to be around things that are both personal and professional, that personal and professional development, right? So it's, yes, you can go and learn about contracts and food and beverage, or you can go and learn about emotional intelligence and the art of communication, and how to find different ways that we can talk
And
to
we're
people.
one being, right? Like we're one, like you keep saying,
One,
this is just life. And I'm like, that is true. And we're one being, whether it's developing personally and professionally, we are one being and we bring all of ourselves to our workplace, to our events. So is there a particular lesson that you've learned through you've probably faced lots of different challenges and disruptions and things not going exactly as planned over the years with your events. Is there a lesson that you've learned along the way that you want to share with
yeah,
us?
I've learned to trust the people that you're bringing with you. So, it's like, there's something happens every day, every twice a day, 7 times a day at
Yeah.
an event that you don't expect. And so understanding, putting enough infrastructure into place that people know, what those parameters are, so that they can solve a lot of problems before they get to me. That's really important.
Yeah.
And that when they're coming to me, they're coming to me with the solution as well as the problem, because we don't have
Love that.
usually time to go through a bunch of solutions. You
Yes.
need to generally deal with something that's fairly immediate. And so coming with here's what's going on. Here's what we think we should do. Great. Because generally they've thought it through enough that you can make it happen.
Yeah.
And I have lots of good examples of, I have some favorite examples of when we did MPI WEC in Vancouver in 2010.
Yeah.
We did it all, it was mostly outside, and we had this massive, we created the world's greatest backyard.
Wow.
And one of the things I thought would be really fun to do is to have a laundry line, but that have cirque performers on it.
Oh.
And they're like, no, like, what?
You're like, no, they have a great vision.
Off like a big t-shirt. I'm like, okay, yeah, it's a dumb idea. I'm over it. But then they called me the next week and they're like, can you come by the studio? And I was like, sure. Like, what's up? They're like, just come down. We want to show you. So they had figured out how to rig a laundry line using airline cable and sewing carabiners into jeans.
Oh, wow.
So that they could actually do a performance on a laundry line in the middle of the plaza, which, every once in a while it would just pop up and be this little 5-minute
show.
Oh. But that you have that surprise and delight moment for the participants, right? So it's about just planting seeds and trusting that ideas will come forth. And I think that whether that's with your children, with your teammates, with your coworkers, there's lots of, things that we plant and you wait to see what happens.
Yeah.
But they need to be nurtured. They need to be given some space and some sunlight and some water and some, the human equivalents of what those things are. And then, connect some dots and just see what happens, I think is really, that's kind of the fun of life, really, is to see what you can plant and what happens with it.
And when it delights and when it works beautifully. So how are you using all this wisdom, years of wisdom and experience to help other people? What do you do to kind of pay it forward or take the
I'm
lessons?
full of good advice for people.
Okay.
Anybody who knows me will be like, what? So I think that it's, I just try to be open and available to people if they want to
Okay.
talk about things.
Okay.
I speak on subjects that open up vulnerabilities, and with sight and with IMEX, in both cases, and especially IMEX, my gosh, we are not afraid to tackle the tough subjects. So there's sessions on menopause. There's, a speaker who will be coming with her new book this year, Dina Mitchell, who during the she just recognized that there was a need for people to be able to talk about suicide.
Mm.
So she started it's called the Realize Foundation, which is to support veterans and hospitality workers
Okay.
with suicide.
Yeah.
We have a very active, pick a part of our industry that is a specialty group. We bring them all together. I really look at IMEX as the mothership, and, there's going to be sessions on the bans and advocacy that LGBT MPA are doing. And, we just have some people coming to talk about things that are just like the things we need to be talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that we spend so much time being like, oh, fluff, 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 everything's great. Like everything's not great. Everything's not great in the world. Everything's not necessarily great in our homes.
Yeah.
Everything's not necessarily great at every moment of all time. So let's talk about those challenges, because at the end of the day, one of the things I've really been playing with is this idea, and it came from, there's a lot of things about how we remember things. So, but basically when we attend an event, we attend as our whole self. And you might be at an event for 3 hours or 3 days or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But you'll remember about 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So what are going to be those moments that you take away? And I think it's just about, creating more of those authentic spaces that people can have those more human conversations, because that's what we're going to remember, the wow things. Like I met, T Swift, and it's amazing. That's going to be one thing. But it's quite another thing. It's the moments that people will remember. And I think for me, some of those most satisfying moments, and sometimes I find out about them 15 years later, are when you can do something. I had a friend of mine, Julie, come up, and she said to me, this was pretty recently, but she was referring back to an event that we did probably 2001, 2002.
Okay.
It was a long time ago, and she was the venue manager and I was the event producer. And I always put at the bottom of my production schedules, like, don't spoil the magic. Like, people have just invested 550, whatever, a lot of money in creating this event for this experience. And then, it's just like there's still 100 people in the room and they start whipping off tablecloths and turning on lights. I'm like, just give us 10 minutes for people to leave. And so somebody started, whipping something up, and I just went over and was like, very like, kind but firm, like, sorry, but you really can't do that. No, like, and so she said what she realized in that moment is that, particularly as women in an industry where we're often dealing with what would appear to be stronger personalities, that it's okay for us to stand up for ourselves.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was 20 years later that she told me that. And so I think that, it's moments like that where you're just like, we need to realize that our words have power and that we can have impact.
Yeah.
And that we need to be really careful with that power, and we need to be kind.
Good. Yes.
And, and from that, we'll start to get a ripple on effect of happiness.
That's right. Use it for good, and absolutely. And also to identify the whole person. I speak sometimes about suicide, always about mental health and ourself and self-care. But I think it's so important to remind people. I also love that story goes back 20 years, and you were so attention to the detail to know that taking off that tablecloth steals a piece of the magic. And I'm coming to this event, to this movie, for this 2 hours, for this 3 days, to escape a little bit of the mundane routine of my life. And I want it to have a level of magicalness, not just magic. I want it to have meaning, and I want it to have head and heart and actionable, but all of that. So if you could leave us with one thing today, what do you want to tell the listeners about that are going through a disruption in their career, in their health, in their physical life of surviving? We know there's a lot of hurricane survivors still out there. So what do you want to tell people? How do you want to encourage them to not let those disruptions define them? Is a big part for me. So mental health and caring for our whole self is so important, but it's not all of us. And we have bad days, but we also have good days. So how do we not allow it to define us and to kind of soar above that? What is your final wisdom and words for everyone?
So I think that all you can do is just breathe. It's one step at a time. There is a speaker that we saw. I wish I could remember her name. I cannot at the moment.
Okay.
She wrote a book called House in the Sky, and she was a prisoner of Somalians for 461 days. And we went and saw her speak, and she was one of the most incredible speakers that I've ever seen, and had incredibly horrible things happen to her. And she said, sometimes I didn't think about what was going to happen next month or next week or tomorrow. I just thought about how I could get through to the next minute. And I think that we will all be very lucky to never have to go through something as truly horrifying. She came out of that experience and she returned home to Canada, and she started a foundation. And when the Somalian crisis started, they were the first people on the ground taking in 1 million pounds of food. Mm-hmm. So she didn't let it own her. Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of power in understanding that what we mostly have as humans is the ability to hope and the ability to give. And so we need to do both of those things.
Absolutely. Generosity and hopefulness. And if people want to get to know you better or follow you or connect with you, where's the best place to connect with you?
I'm pretty easy to find. So look at my name. There's not two of me. There's one of me. So I'm probably most responsive on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And then Instagram for me is all about the nature and the things that make me happy. Mm-hmm. It's not really where I talk about professional things, but so that's kind of fun to follow me there. Yeah. And just reach out. I'm pretty open.
Awesome. And we can hang out.
I don't like the answer, but
you can reach out, but I'll be honest with you. And we can go to IMAX, right?
And you can definitely go to IMAX, which is going to be October 17th to 19th. We have the show floor is full, so I already know that probably there's people listening who will be there, certainly as partners. People can attend as visitor buyers or as hosted buyers. There's no registration fee. And if you are buying services and looking to make the time to make appointments with exhibitors, then you can apply to be a hosted buyer. And then we're going to take care of flying you there and housing you and giving you time and space to do all the meetings with partners. But also there's a lot of cool stuff that happens during IMAX. So it's pretty fun.
Awesome. Sounds great. And probably hotel rooms are already booking up. So if you're going, get that
Don't
hotel.
Wait.
Don't wait. It's a big event. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today at H3 TV. And thank you to our listeners. If you have questions or need encouragement about how to stay hopeful, healthy, and happy in the midst of these disruptions or just real life, how to take care of your mental, emotional, and physical health, please tune in every week. I'm Annie Meehan, keynote speaker and change agent. Take care and see you next week.